Right, 2023 Gordon Rothacker Medal winner. Has a great ring to it. Lance Justice, hello and congratulations.
How you going, Paul?
Very good. I might get you just to hold that up just a little bit higher for me and go from there. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Must be a great thrill.
Yeah, it is a huge thrill. It's something I didn't think that. Well, I sort of hoped one day I'd win an award as prestigious as this, but I didn't think that I would. So, huge thrill. I can't really say. There's not too many people who won it. It's when you look at it and you think about it, it's the highest award in harness racing that's handed out. So there's no other award greater than that. So it is huge.
You're 66 years old. I don't know. Well, you probably would have driven against Gordon, but did you drive against Gordon in the halcyon days, like when he was at his top?
No, I never drove against Gordon in his halcyon days. I drove against him at his end of his career a few times. Always a gentleman, a great chap, and just a lifelong friend of our families. And yeah.
So that would make it that little bit more special, I'd imagine.
Oh, what really made it so special was I remember when I was first started training, my son was 1 year old, and my partner, I said, we'll head over to Melbourne to see if we can find a horse. And I said to Mum, I said, you know Gordon Rothacker? And she goes, yeah, we're great friends. And I said, can you ring him up? And she goes, I'll write him a letter. And I said, no. So I want to go over next weekend. So I virtually went to Gordon's place unannounced and lobbed there. Said, Gordon, Mum said that to say hello, and I'm looking for a horse to take back to South Australia race to make my name and get my lights in my name in lights and find the glory. And he was very apprehensive and quiet, but we had a cup of tea and scones, and they made us feel so welcome, and walked around, looked at every horse in the place, and there was a heap of horses out in the paddock that had retired, or he'd retired because he kept them all out the back. And he had this horse there called Chris, which was Rhett's brother.
Yep.
And he said, don't usually do this, but take him home. He said on the proviso that you can race him, on the proviso that when you finish you bring him back and he comes back to this paddock.
Wow.
So that's how I got
Chris.
He was the first horse I ever sort of really got from Victoria to train, yeah. So it was Chris.
How good was Chris? I know how good Rhett was.
Oh, Chris wasn't nowhere near as good as Rhett, but he was good enough to win a few races in South Australia. And I remember the first start I give him, Ray Fewings, the race commentator, said, oh, this thing's going to win a lot of races. But he was that sort of horse. He was very deceiving. He was big, strong and bold, but he just never quite lived up to the Rhett criteria. But I trained him for, I suppose it was been 6 to 12 months. And then I was going to take him home, and Mum said, oh, I'll take him and give him a few starts. So Mum kept him for another 12 months, and then she took him home to Gordon's one weekend and he retired.
It's one of the great parts about harness racing. Family sport and a friendship sport, and you make friends for life, and it's quite interesting the full circle that it's gone for you, that you've actually now won. A gentleman that you had enough cheek to basically knock on his door and say, can you please give me your horse?
When I think about it now, Gordon, when I went to his place, it must have been a bit daunting, because I sort of introduced myself, told him who I was. He knew who I was once I introduced myself, and then I had to sell myself in the next hour and a half to 2 hours that I was there, that I was going to look after this horse, because Gordon was anybody that knows Gordon, he was a great one. His horses never ever got mistreated, and they were never ever skinny. He looked after them all. He loved them all, and to give one of his children away would have been huge. So I must have sold it pretty good to accomplish it.
It's funny because you said there before you haven't got your tie on and you haven't got your medal. Gordon very rarely would not have a tie on. I mean, any race meeting, anything to do with harness racing, he's such a prestigious person, wasn't he?
He was just so quiet, laid back, and just assuring when you spoke to him. He just, I don't know, I used to hang off every word he said. So yeah.
It's interesting the twist this has taken, because you and I didn't do a lot of pre-talking about how we're going to take it, but it's just great insight. And I suppose that as you said, it gives it that little bit more meaning when you actually realise and you've met the gentleman, and it's a name synonymous in harness racing, still is with Judy still on the board, and it's just one of the great harness racing names. And but the fact that you've got that little bit more, I suppose, incentive, if you like, that you had a great association with him when you were starting out. So yeah,
it was actually 40 years ago. I worked it out the other day, because my son's 43, and he or maybe 26. He's 43, and he was only just toddling. And I remember we let him go at Gordon's place, and he ran straight into a big bunch of stinger nettles outside the stable. So he never forgets the place. He still remembers it.
Has nightmares of it.
Yeah.
To yourself, did a little bit of research. You were 14 when you drove your first winner?
No, I didn't. I wasn't.
Or you were 14 when you started?
I actually started a lot younger than that. I was probably, my first thoughts of driving a horse, I was about 4. Because Mum used to drive the old jog cart to the shops because we didn't have a car when Dad went to work.
Yep.
And she used to put old Henry in, a trotter called Land Echo, and we'd jog to the shops, which is about 2 to 3 miles from the farmhouse. And I used to get the reins to drive the horse. And John used to complain, so we used to tie a lead rope. She used to tie a lead rope on the crossbar of the jog cart, which had a solid floor, and John would have the lead rope to drive. And I always used to say all our lives, that's why he's got concrete hands, because he never actually got to hold the reins much. But that's all right. He'll get over that.
He's probably right. I'll get him back next interview. I'll get him back. So 22, was that right when you?
I actually, John probably drove winner a few years earlier than myself.
John's 6 years junior than you?
No, one.
No. 1 year.
One and a half.
Okay, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Geez, I've done my research, haven't I?
No, he probably drove winner before me. He drove Gather Wealth. It's a bit of a family history that I sort of had to go out, and I actually went away from home and took a job in the middle of Australia and stuff like that for a while. And John and Mum continued with the horses, but I'd been driving them. I'd always been jogging them right from being an early teenager. My first trial drive was at Globe Derby, and I was about 14 or 15.
Okay, yeah.
And we had a horse called Colour My World. He was not much good, but he was a lovely old horse. And Bobby Jakes was driving him, and he was a bit one pace. And I said to Bobby, I walked down to Bobby and I said, Bob, can you do me a favour? I said, can you poke him up in the breeze and give him a bit of curry? I said, because I think he's a bit one paced. His track work seems to be really good. And I was only about 14 or 15. Bob took his helmet off and said, here, you drive the bloody thing yourself. It was on a Sunday morning. So he gave me the helmet, and I went out and drove, and that was how I started. So I went out, sat parked, and got beat ahead by a neck, and thought, well, that's pretty easy, and went back. And from then I become a fair bit more interested in the driving side of it.
So the reason you went like out north, and that was like money, or you weren't that keen on the horses? Or?
No, I was keen on the horses, but I'd moved away from home, and I was working for the company that was doing drainage and stuff, and I moved away from home, and we living down at Goolwa and on the beach, and it was just
nice.
My first time away from home, and I was by myself, and that job finished, and then there was another job that came up at a place called Marlborough, and I really hadn't looked at the geographical maps or atlases, and I took the position, went out there, same company, and found out it was just a Marlborough. It was a bore in the middle of Australia, about 150 kilometres south of a mission called Undalkna, and it's the middle of nowhere. And I'd gone from a beach where had all the boys with surfboards and parties and you name it, like to a place where we're living in an Acto hut in the middle of Australia with a million flies.
Yeah.
And so I stayed there for a couple of years, and it was really good money, but it was good enough to sort of, take the pressure off the family at home, and the horses. We had a horse called Aaron Oak that was going okay, so yeah. And I even remember a really good story there. I was out there, and we one of the first Saturday nights we're there, we all went back to Cooper Pedy to the Yugoslav club to play cards. It was May 5th, 1980. And a friend of Mum's that used to have horses with Mum was an opal dealer in Cooper Pedy, and he's also the SP bookmaker. And he was there, and it was great because I'd seen him. But what happened was all the chaps that were at the club, all the guys that had been working with us, we all went down like about 6 cars to get there, all mad punters. So they were asking me for tips. So we were betting on it was Showgrounds at the time, I think, was running. Or it might have been Moonee Valley, I can't remember it. And I tipped about 4 winners. And one was Copper Saturn, of course, but I mean, I was just like on fire, and I'd sent him broke. He had to go home to get more money to pay him. So, yeah, and a really good bloke too. And I didn't realise at the time how much damage I'd done to him until years after, when I met him and he told me, he said, he said, that was a terrible night for me. He said, those guys usually had no idea. He said, but this night they were just pulling these horses around, because I used to follow the trots like any psychopathic kid that was interested. I didn't matter whether it was Tasmania, Perth. I just used to follow them and just used to have a...
So you still always had that love of them?
I always had the love of the harness horse, yes.
Yeah. Your first winner, I did see its name, I can't think of it. Skipette. You still well and truly remember that?
Yes. I was in front by a good 25 to 30 metres a lap to go, and I won by a short half head.
Hear the footprints alone.
Well, the track at Cadena was about 520 metres around. It was very, very small. and I was so far in front that it was like, do I slow up or do I keep going? And I think I went 2:19 overall, but it was the way the race was run. It was run the first. I just had them going so that nothing could get near us.
Yeah, and went for that. How would you describe your early years in the industry? And got to realise too, like you guys were from South Australia, and when you look at some of the names from South Australia as far as quality drivers and horse people, full stop, like it must have been a very hard place to get a go in when you look at some of the names of the people that have come from that dynasty, if you like, of South Australian harness racing.
Exactly. This was highlighted only to me the last few weeks. I've been going through the old gazettes.
Yeah.
Because in Harness Racing Victoria, they've got a heap of gazettes there. So I've actually skipped through them and time periods, and you look at the people that... And some of the horses that I did eventually drive and get to drive, they were driven by blokes like Kevin Brook and Lloydie Webster and Dick Webster, and even Jeffrey was a young bloke at the time coming up, and he was getting all the good drives too. He used to, some of those, it was really hard, and there was no junior drivers claims back there, so there was no hope of getting a drive. I mean, what would happen was you'd go to the trials at Gawler, and you'd go to all the trials and you'd drive all these horses, and then when they got to the racetrack, the owners had put on Bob Glasgow or Bobby Jakes or...
You're saying some great names when you're running these off.
Yeah, Graham Keatley, those sort of fellas. And Brian Mitten, you wouldn't get a steer.
Yep.
You had no hope of getting a steer. So the only hope you had was getting your own horse up and trying to get them to get them fit and then take them to the races. I mean, John and I both, we took a long time to race at Globe Derby. I mean, you'd only race at Globe Derby on the Saturdays, and then you would have, this is in the early days, and you would have Gawler on the Tuesdays, and Cadena and Kapunda alternating on that date. Some Friday nights you'd have Port Pirie. So there wasn't a lot of meetings to go. It was a very structured, very good calendar, because it gave you a chance to have a life, and you knew that you wouldn't be racing for 3 or 4 days and stuff like that. So, but in saying that, it didn't give you a lot of opportunities either.
No.
And to drive the amount of winners that I ended up getting in South Australia was huge, because we didn't have, it's not like Victoria, we'd be going every day of the week. No. We'd be going like 3 times a week, maybe. And, and then you get the Sunday meetings like Strathalbyn and Victor Harbour and like a lot of the good, and they, like blokes like Keith Bennett would still go there, and all those sort of fellas, they'd still go there to drive, but not as much. So as a kid, you had a better chance to get a drive at Victor Harbour. And because they weren't TAB meetings, it was, if you were there with your gear ready to go, you could get a drive.
Yeah.
So like it'd be like a race there. If you knew there was a horse with no driver on it, when they come out, you think, they haven't put a driver on that horse. So you get to the track early and go up to front yourself up and say, I'm here I'll drive this horse for you if you want.
Were you a good driver back then? Would you say you were a good driver? I think you're a very good driver at the end.
Yeah, I always had a little bit of talent, because I could win at the trials.
Yep.
And I thought they seemed to run for me. But I've always said, you're only as good as your horse. And it's not being a good driver, it's making the least amount of mistakes that the other drivers make. And then also knowing your horse. If you're driving a horse that you think has got a bit of ability, leave it out in the open. If you think he's got no ability, get to the pegs and or follow the luckiest or best driver in the race.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what they're driving, just follow them through, because most of the good drivers wouldn't go there if they weren't driving a good horse.
One thing about South Australia, you had a lot of drivers that knew about their left hand, that would take the easiest drive home. A great horseman, a great friend of mine told me that years ago, and Jeff Webster, he's synonymously known for going up inside Trevor Kelly. All these guys, they knew, like basically back to what you're saying, drove the horses to their limitations.
Yeah, and most of them knew how good they were.
Yeah.
And Yeah, so that was exactly right. I mean, look, you know, like I probably took, you know, 5 years. I started driving in, I think, 1980, 81, and I didn't really get my first Globe Derby winner till it was late 84.
Wow.
And I didn't want to tell anybody because I'd driven probably 20 or 30 winners, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot when you're only going around 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And, you know, and because people were starting to say, oh, he drives all right. So they'd give me a drive, and I was driving a lot of bad horses, like for Jack Halen and those sort of horses. And if anybody can remember Jack Halen, most of your gear was tied together with string, and your cart had wire holding the frame together, that sort of stuff. And like, you wouldn't drive for him if you were sane, but if you're so desperate to get a start, you'd drive for him.
Yeah,
I mean, his stables were under a great big electrical tower built under there's a big towers that go through the electrical towers.
Yep.
He had his stables were under one of that. His horses lived under one of those.
So they could stay dry.
Yeah. Well, not so they say stay dry, because I think because it was cheap rent.
Yep.
Because no one wanted to live under them.
Oh, yeah. So it was
Yeah,
probably
under the
probably
tower.
built.
It was
It was
under
probably built, but no one wanted to be there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So yeah, it was just a tin shed like cover, but. You know, and I remember like, all the kids that used to come up that were desperate to get a start would drive his horses.
Yep. Yeah.
And then you'd move on to the horses like the trotters. We started driving a lot of trotters, and like Dick White, to his credit, was a great man for starting off the kids.
Yep.
And because he had so many trotters, there used to be 2 stables. There'd be Dick White and Graham Goldsworthy. Graham Goldsworthy would have 6 trotters in a race, and Dick would have 6 in the race. So you're in one camp or the other, and you very seldom switched across.
Oh, you weren't allowed to? You weren't?
No, because Dick, if you went on the Goldie's horses, Dick wouldn't put you on his horses. So
it sounds like there was a lot of politics at play too, which must have been fun for a young man trying to cut his teeth and get going.
I learned from the very go that if you don't get involved in the political side of it, and I was from a very young age, I was the Square Trotters Association Secretary Treasurer for a long time. And that was because Dick White was the president.
Yep.
And he wanted someone to do the bookwork, and that was me.
Yep.
Which I used to pass on to my wife at the time. And it was a really good thing. But I mean, the clashes we used to have, you'd go to Cadena and Dick would have 6 in a race, and he'd say, look, he said, do your best on this horse, because I was always on the back markers. He put me on the back markers because he reckoned that I seemed to get him closer there. He said, do your best. He said, I'm not telling you to not try. He said, do your best and win, because a check's a check.
Yep.
He said, but I'd like number 3. I think he's a good oath. And I'd say, okay, I'd listen to him, but I never listened to him. And the amount of times that he would say to me on the way home, you're not getting the drive next week. You've beat me again. You beat that horse again. And I'll never forget to this day, I was sitting outside of a horse, and I suppose I can name him. And it was a really good owner, one of Dick's really good owners. He had a earth moving job equipment, and he said, look, he said, Bob's been trying to win a race for 5 years. He said, he's paid up for all these horses. He said, we would really like him to win tonight. He said, so I know you've got the best horse, and you'll sit outside him. He said, but can you help him? And I said, Dick, I've never done it in my life. So I'm outside of him, and he fair dinkum had me beat on the home turn, or coming off the back straight at Cadena. He had me beat. I was flat out, and he had me beat. And he went to go for home, and there was one on his back that was bolting, and I said, Bob, you got one on your back bolting. But he understood what I said, but he put the brakes on, and my horse loomed up, stuck head in front, and beat him. And I don't think he ever won a race.
It stuffed it right up.
Yeah, if he just sat, if he just realised that he didn't, because he was about to leave me.
Yep.
And then let the one out, and I just thought, I won't run second then.
Yep.
And he'll get beat.
Yep.
But he just misunderstood, and he just didn't.
How was Dick?
He was devastated as usual. Had an old biscuit van that was turned into a horse truck, and we used to have a seat. We'd sit behind there, and if he was in the bad books, he'd be looking back at you all night in the rearview mirror going.
That must have been a real fun time. I mean, challenging time for you and fun time. You progressed. What'd you say then? Was 84 before you drove your first one?
Yeah, my first Globe Derby winner was on a Monday, and it was trained by a bloke, really fantastic trainer called Jack Bell, and his daughter married Paul Carman's brother,
Yep.
the footballer here. So, yeah, it was all like a famous sort of family, and they had really good horses at Wavell. And I remember in that race, my first win at Globe Derby Park, you wouldn't believe it, a horse that I used to drive called Golden Acacia, the driver got tipped out and I was back in the field, and he was alongside, and the horse was alongside me, and it was running up behind me, and I sort of grabbed it and caught it, and I thought I could probably pull it out of the race here, and I thought, if I do that, I'm not going to win the race. So I just let it go, and then just pushed it off, and it wandered up the track, and then the clerk caught it, and then I went on and won the race.
You won the race?
Yeah, I won the race, yeah.
Even after you...
Yeah. But that was
don't suppose there's any video footage of that, is there?
I don't think so. I probably might be able to find it, but I mean, I not like I grabbed it. I just put my hand up and grabbed it for a second. And for that split, because at the time I'd been working as a clerk of the course at the races and at the trots, because Dick used to do all the clerk of the courses. So what Dick would do, there was Steve Pearson, myself, and I don't think he was doing it, and Michael Pearson, and he would rotate the three of us to doing the clerk of the course. And then occasionally, if I went to a meeting like Strathalbyn where I had a drive, I'd be the clerk of the course to race 4. Then I'd get John to jump on the horse in race 5, be the clerk, and then I would drive in the race and then get off and start clerking again after that. So that's how we were surviving. And in between that, we were working on the barriers, putting all the horses in the starting gates at the races, on race midweek meetings, and some Saturdays at Moorfield, most Saturdays at Moorfield and Victoria Park.
So, by the sounds, you've both done the hard yards. You've done,
we did.
You've done the hard yards.
That's how we met all the thoroughbred people. That's why I've got so many good friends in thoroughbred racing now. I know like all the trainers and all the jockeys, and Ricky Peach and Johnny Letts and Desi Coleman, who just passed away. He was a fantastic man, and yeah, I used to lead them round to the barrier, so I knew them all.
Yeah,
you know, and in those days you could get away with a lot more when you work on the barriers. And I remember one day Lettsy come up to me at, I think it was Victoria Park, and he said, "Look," he said, "this thing I'm riding," he said, "it's 50 to 1." He said, it's just got to get out the gate." So I think, I can't remember, Stephen or Michael and myself got each one of us got each side. I got each side and someone got the other side. And as the Jakes, we just chased it out the gate, and it jumped out in the first 3, and it won the race at 50 to 1.
And you're on.
We're all on. We had our $5 on, yeah.
Good result.
But you couldn't do that now, because now they've got video. And I remember Bruce Fullerton, the chief steward, calling us in one day and saying, "Boys," he said, "you can't be chasing them out the gate like that." He goes, "There's no video there, but we're going to put a camera in there soon."
So you don't get in trouble.
So
when did you make it? So I know as the rain starts to set in, we might have to move. We might not. We'll see how we go. Okay. When would you say that you started to make it? I know Whirly Dream's a horse that I did look up because he raised his head last week, or a couple of shows that I've done. He was 86, I think you got him.
Yeah, it happened very quickly. It went from like being 80. I was going through things 82, 83, 84 on the gates and clerk of the course, and then 85 a little bit, still clerking and then virtually 86 when Whirly come along. Then I started to get horses to train. People thought, this guy can train a bit, and I started doing a bit. I remember I had horses in between. My first trip to Moonee Valley, I think I mentioned it in the presentation of the Gordon Rothacker. I took a horse called Gemalinka, which was quite a nice horse in Adelaide. I won the Strath Cup with her.
Yeah.
And I took her to Moonee Valley, and I sat outside Elcourt Oak. And I'm trying to give it to Vinny down the back straight, and he's run me off the track like Vin used to always do. He always used to run up 2 or 3 cuts. And Donny Dove's on Tis a Miss in behind him. And then Vin's come back, and as we get the corner, Don's poking between myself, and I'm a metre, like 3/4 length in front of him. And I put my arm up to stop him from pushing me out, and I got 6 weeks for it. Now, I went into the steward's room, and I knew I was in trouble when I sat down, and Jerry Laylaw says, "Hey, Don, how you going? Good. Vin, how are you?" to me, and I thought, I'm in trouble here. These guys know. And I actually appealed it. I actually appealed that thing, but I didn't go ahead with the appeal, because the appeal was going to be heard in May of '83, and my son was due to be born not long after. So I thought, if I run away, I'll miss that. So yep. I didn't appeal it. I did the 6 weeks. I just had the 6 weeks, copped it.
And went from there. Good names you mentioned there too. You're rattling off some great names about this industry.
Well, it even gets better, because a few years later I went back to Moonee Valley, and I tried to take the lead off Rita Burnett with a horse called Tronon, and she wouldn't let me go. And then Vinny come around on something, she let him go. And then after the race she came up and said, "If I'd known you were going to hold the front, or you were going to drive like someone that cared, I would have let you go on to the front." So yeah.
So
I got a bit of respect from the drivers here. So
Did that happen because of your upbringing, you reckon, and almost a hard knocks, but the right people around you as well?
I think so. I remember going in one of my first drivers' challenges. A bloke came up to me and he goes, "I love it watching you drive." And I said, "Why?" He said, "You look like you're so desperate." But what he didn't understand is when John and I first started, we were desperate.
Yeah.
If I went to a country meeting at Cadena or Port Pirie with a horse called Bachelor Brave, that's all I had. If he didn't run in the first three, he never used to win. He used to run second and third. I couldn't go back next week. I couldn't afford it. I mean, there was times when I would.
You wouldn't have enough money.
Well, my mate at the shop, where my partner used to work, I'd cash a cheque for $25, knowing I had no money in the account, and then going to trots. And this is a terrible thing to say, and run a place, and then
put the money in your account.
Yeah, or go back to him Sunday and take the cheque back and give him the cash. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, the stories like that. I mean, when I first started, we blew the old car up and I learnt my lesson: never rush to a meeting with a car. You're better off being scratched. But at the time, it was like
had to get there, had to win,
had to get there. So I pushed, blew the car up, had no car. So I went. A bloke bought it was an old Fairlane round, and I think it was $5,000. And I went to the bank, and they said, "No, you haven't got any. Really, you haven't got your financials in order, and we can't give the money." So I went out that Saturday night. I drove 5 winners. I walked into the bank on the Monday morning. I put the cash on his desk and said, "Can you give me a bank cheque for $5,000?" And he did it just to show him that
you didn't have to. It was just more spite.
Yeah. So that was that was the night I drove 5 and I won the Sires final, and it was just a huge night.
Yeah, it would have been cool. Whirly Dream, outstanding horse, 175 starts, 70 wins, raced from 2. He was a great horse for the Mick O'Brien. And did Mick O'Brien train him? He drove him.
Mick drove him, but Billy Wilson trained him this whole time, and his son Ivan helped him.
Started as a 2-year-old, and I think he had his last start for you, which he actually won, as would have been rising. If he wasn't 10, he was rising 10?
Yeah, had really bad legs his last start. He actually was a really good horse to me. He was my first ever horse that I could actually rely on, and he was a story too. When he come across to me, I remember a bloke called Peter Gorst from down Lake Bulbul. He used to have the fuel depot, and him and I, we were really good mates. And I went to New Zealand with him, and I don't know how I met him. I think through a horse called Timely Shower that Merv Dillon was training.
Yeah.
It raced at Mildura, and I was there, and it raced, and I met Peter, and I knew Merv because Merv used to train for
Gemalinka as well.
Gemalinka, yeah. So we were sort of tied up, and Kentucky fella, I think not Kentucky fella.
Glentucky,
yeah. So they were the horses. They were owned by Arthur Smith, who
was
lived in South Australia.
He was an opal miner.
Yeah, he was a prawn boat, owned prawn boats before that, but he was a good guy. And he Gemalinka. So I met Peter and Peter Gorst, and he knew Mick O'Brien. And Willie Dream was due to come to South Australia, and he was due to go to Albie Holberton. But because Peter knew Mick, they said, "Go stay with Lance. He'll look after it." That's how I got the horse. He come to my place, and I'll never forget, I was living in an old farm, crusty old farm. It was about 150 years old. I painted the rails, I put sand in the yard, and when Billy and Ivan lobbed up, they said, "Oh, we'll have that yard over there." It was the chicken shed. They said, "We don't want the good one." But I said, "Oh, look, please, I've done this, so put him in this one."
Yeah, when he went from there.
And then Ivan said to me, "Well, I've shot him through the week." He said, "So you won't have to shoe him," because he left the horse with me for a couple of weeks because he went terrible. He broke the first night on the home turn, had the race won, and just galloped. And I looked at his feet and I thought, geez, if I just get these feet all the same length, I'll be half a chance of having a good horse.
Yeah.
And then Ivan said, "Oh, you won't need to shoe him because I did 1 foot Monday, 1 foot Tuesday, 1 on Thursday, and I did the other one yesterday." So I thought, okay. So as soon as he drove out the gate, the first thing I did was got the horse out, trimmed his feet up, and set him on an even thing. And he always used to wear spreaders. And I said to Bill, "Listen, this horse doesn't need spreaders." He goes, "Well," he said, "he hit his knee as a 2-year-old. I want spreaders on him." So I left spreaders on him, but they were that loose that he didn't really use them.
Yeah. Did he teach you a lot? He must have.
The horse taught me a lot. The horse taught me a hell of a lot, yeah.
Yeah. Because you look at his record, and as I said, he was a good 2-year-old. I think he won his second or third start for them. They got him through to Metropolitan class, and then he came across you and competed in great races. You brought him back, I think, to compete here and won back in Melbourne, I believe.
I did a few occasions. I brought him back. He won he won the heat of the Winfield Cup, beating Paleface Bubble and My Lightning Blue.
Yep.
And they quinnellaed the Inter-Dominion that year in New Zealand.
Yep.
And I didn't take Whirly because I was just young and didn't understand about travelling them. And I actually went with Peter Gorst about 2 months before the Inters to New Zealand to try and find somewhere to stay. And we looked around and I just found them, they weren't that.
Yep.
They
What
weren't-
were you after?
Yeah, well, the people weren't that. I loved the wrong places and I spoke to the wrong people. That's all I'll say. They weren't that
Inviting.
welcoming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But he just seemed to do everything. And I was looking at the times. I think a lot of the races he was winning, going 2.2s and 2.3s. 1:57 back in. I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was around Cadena, I think it was, where he paced 57. Like he must have been just a unique animal.
we time trialled him at Globe Derby one night, and he time trialled in about 56.9 or 57, something like that. But the worst thing about it was they had an old sulky hanging up in the Hall of Fame, which was an old American sulky, which we used on him, which was like about 40 years old. It was really, really wide. And every time I was driving, he was trying to get into the running line, but he was actually brushing the hub rail because
you were so
because we had a hub rail then, and because with the width of the cart, he had to be like 3/4 of a cart off the fence.
Yep.
All the way, and not used to where he used to race, and he kept brushing the rail, taking time off of his time.
I'd say, we'll talk about driving and that later on in life. I'll put this politely. You're tight, you're aggressive, you never really gave an inch. Is a horse like Whirly Dream and the opposition you were racing against back then on those sorts of tracks, is that the sort of horse that taught you to drive in that manner?
Yeah, I think that also the fact that I was always driving with desperation.
Yep.
I was always driving because I was desperate, and that's why I got suspended so much, because I used to always drive very, very tight. And I've over the years, I think about some of the suspensions I've copped. You wouldn't get suspended today for them.
Yeah.
I mean, because it was just because when you become aggressive and the authorities get used to you being that aggressive, you don't get given any leeway. I mean, if a horse turns his head and hangs in, it was always the driver's fault.
Yep.
So I accepted that. I mean, that's the way I wanted to do things, and I still think today, you've got to look. If you don't look like you're going to own it, you'll never own it. So if you make a decision, and I've said this to kids that have driven for me, I don't care if you muck up, but own that decision.
Stick by it.
Stick by it. Don't go 50 yards and change your mind and do something else.
Your first winner. You're 20 metres in front with a lap to go. Well, you're there. You just cop it.
If you get beat, you get beat.
Yeah.
I mean, so you just got to own your mistakes and own your wins and glories.
So yourself and John pretty much really started to dominate South Australian harness racing with sheer weight of numbers. And I remember Sky Channel coming out, and I think you trained 7 winners there at one stage.
Yeah, we did, and I think that probably was the fact that we were both racing together and we were both very competitive. And we didn't give an inch to each other.
Yeah.
And it got to the stage where, we had to separate from the stables. Initially, we were all together on one side, and then I went right around the other side, and he was over on the left bank, so that we,
didn't fight.
Yeah, no altercations if you come off the track. And
yeah.
Because John used to be a bit of a hothead, and it's a pretty emotional thing. And he had a group of really emotional owners, and a lot of them were Italians, and they. And I think that's what made the industry in South Australia so good, that we were both good, and there wasn't just one stable dominating. So
Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it.
Do you enjoy it now when you sit back and look at it? Like, is there parts of it you probably would like to have done differently?
I think sometimes that there are parts that I would have done a little bit different, but overall, I enjoyed the whole time. It was very stressful because you're always in the spotlight. So if you were driving, I mean, we had some really big jewels. I mean, I had some camps, and the opposition in South Australia wasn't weak at the time.
No.
I mean, you had the Cavalleros that were flying, you had the Websters.
Rossi Sugars.
You had the Sugarses.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't mugs. They knew what they were doing. And You just had to pick when you thought had the right one to. And look, honestly, I do think that I bluffed my way to the front on a number of occasions over the years because people were so used to it. Of me, like if I wouldn't try anything. Knowing your horse, if you know your horse is capable, his capabilities, if you drive him to his capabilities, I don't think there's too many times where I've taken someone on, taken the lead off them and then dropped in their face. I'd never do that. And if I did, the time I remember I would be so embarrassed because that was bad judgment by me.
Yep.
If my horse was good enough and I did it, or if I ever kept the breeze and held someone out, parked them out, which wasn't unusual, then my horse, if he didn't win at least 1 second, I'd be really disappointed.
What would you say was your crowning moment, if you like, in South Australia before we touch on coming back here? But what would, is there one, like 7 winners in one night? Is there...
The 7 winners in one night, I actually got suspended. They suspended me.
You get suspended a lot,
I did
don't
get
you?
suspended a lot. I probably spent bloody half my time suspended. Not really, but I just feel like... I know I could have bought a new car with my fines. It would have been a Mercedes.
So what would you say was your like the 7 wins was your crowning
I
moment?
actually did have a Mercedes over in Adelaide for a little while. I was going really good.
Yep.
And I went to the races one day, and I'll never forget, the steward in charge said to me, he fined me, and he said, but you can afford that, you're driving a Mercedes, and he'll know who I'm talking about if he watches this. And I sold Mercedes the next week.
Got a Fairlane? Went and got a Ford Fairlane or something?
I thought, how like...
Yeah. The
It wasn't a new
expectation.
Mercedes, it was just an old Mercedes.
Yeah. So was that the best, your greatest achievement, or just winning premierships, or was there...
Look, the premierships were fantastic. The Whirly Dream winning that first SA Cup was just huge, because before that race, Vinnie Knight wasn't driving the race. Trevor Dove was driving his horse. It was Trev's choice.
Yep.
And Gavin was driving another Bart.
Yep.
And I drew outside the front row. Trev's choice drew 3 or 4, and another Bart drew inside of him. And I was 16 to 1 pop. And Vinnie walked up to me, and I can talk about him now because he's not here to defend himself. And he said, Lance, he said, I know you got a bit of speed. And it was the first time he'd ever spoken to me. I'd driven against him, but it was the first time he'd ever spoken to me. He said, I know you got speed. He goes, but I could put 100 each way on Trev's choice for you if you don't go forward. And I said, well, he doesn't know me very well, obviously. And I just said, put 100 each way on Whirly. I said, and you'll do far better. That's what I said to him, so, yeah.
And you beat Trev's choice?
And I beat another Bart, and Trev's choice, I think, run 3rd or 4th. I think My Lightning Blue run 3rd, I think, maybe.
Yeah, I saw.
It was a good race. It was a race that you wouldn't. They weren't mugs.
There was another horse in that race out the back. One of the names down the, and I was like, have all that for a field. It's just, yeah.
You know what? I look at that race now, and the only regret I've got in that race watching it is that I drove that old horse with the whip too hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I had that race. I could have sat there, but it wasn't just me.
No, it was everyone.
All the drivers were driving like that, and we didn't need to be driving them as hard as that.
It's one of the sad parts about the history of our sport is sometimes the best photos are those with the whips right up in the air, and it's not what the industry's about. It was what it was then, but I mean the education's changed.
And I don't mind the whips in the air, waving the whip and saluting.
Yep.
But
it's when you know they're coming down on the horse.
It's when you look, and like even we changed every year. We've changed and changed and changed. It's got to the stage now where the whip's just used to urge them, but. I look at even like 10 years ago, and I think myself, we've come a long way with that. And we watched the other night. I probably should have mentioned this, but we watched the other night Sokiola win the Miracle Mile, and I drove him out with a whip. It didn't look too bad. I mean, it was harder than what I would have expected, but I mean, it was a Miracle Mile. I'm trying to win it, and then you watch Jody driving in the next heat, and when we were watching it, the whole crowd just went in the room, took a breath, because like. Jody, I mean, she wanted to win, but she was driving like she was chopping wood. But she was really driving him out harder. So,
but it's changed. I mean,
that's the way we used to drive them, and I look at that now, and I think that's the only thing that. And you go back to Richmond Lass and the showground. I was watching showgrounds races the other day, tapes, and oh my God,
they were a cane back then, horrific. Moved to Victoria. We could go for a lot of the horses, but moved to Victoria. Did it exceed your expectations? I mean, you left South Australia at the top of the game, and I gather you would have expected to to do it, but reality is probably a different thing. What's said behind closed doors?
Yeah, look, obviously John had already
Made the
opened
move.
the door, and Joanne had been over here. She had her few horses going around, and John was here, so it wasn't like there was going to be no family here. So I decided in 1999, New Year's Eve it was, that we would go. We took a team of horses to Mildura the night before the Inter-Dominion final at Moonee Valley when John won with Shaker Maker.
Yep.
I stayed at John's place that night, went and watched Shaker Maker win, and we decided, I drove out of the place, I drove out of John's property, just not far from here. I drove down Gisborne, Milton Road, I turned left, and down Ryan's Lane, saw a sign
For
under
sale?
offer where we are now, and rang up Danny Mullen and said, that place under offer, what's the deal? And he said, it's under offer. And I said, can you talk to the people, sign me up, I'll take it, what they want. And I drove back, signed the paperwork to his office.
And that was it?
That was it.
All off the back of Shaker winning the...
Well, yeah, off back shape. We were going to come anyway, but it was that we drove down from Mildura to John's place, and we stopped at Bendigo, and we stopped at Kite, and we went all the way through there and looked at properties, and I just said to Diane, I said, you know, we come to Melbourne to race in Melbourne, you know, even if we haven't got Moonee Valley horses, I want to be close to Moonee Valley. I said, so if it's not Melton, I don't really want to be too far out.
Yeah, be as close as you can.
That's why we come here. It was ideal because it was in between Glenn Tippett's and John Justice's and Gavin just over the back, and John Caldo and Jack Caldo. It was all close. It was really a lot of people were here.
You got going pretty quickly. It wasn't like you...
Seemed really quickly, but it actually wasn't.
Wasn't it?
It was a terrible start. I had a terrible start when I come over.
Did you really?
I had about 18 horses that I'd worked out of the 26 that I was working, I think, that I would bring over. And then before I got here, I sold half of them to Perth because I just didn't think they would make it. So I confidently bought 7 horses over, and a horse that I just bought from New Zealand called Sokiola that's been spelling. And I started off here. We started going to race meetings, and I had a really bad run on barrier draws.
I actually can remember talking to you.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe that I could draw 7 every single start. And it was like, if it wasn't 7, it was 12 or 13 or 11. It was out the back.
Yep.
And I remember, and it's probably a long time ago, it's probably past the statute of limitations now, I hadn't been to Cranbourne. It was my first trip. I decided to go to Cranbourne. I had 3 horses nominated, and I drew 7, 7 and 7. And I thought, I was in the office, I remember, and I just couldn't help. I just screamed, I can't believe this.
Yep.
And I just couldn't believe it. So anyway, cut a long story short, this is when I realised people in Victoria were so good. I just spat, and I left it, and I was really upset about it because I'd drawn 22 sevens before that. Something unbelievable, a statistic you couldn't do.
Yep.
I mean, I even went to the casino one night and stood at the roulette wheel with $400 and went 7, 17, 27, and I never got 1 7 come up once. Yeah, I got 22 sevens in a row, and these were random barrier draws, most of them. And there were times where that was a C1, C2, and you had to draw out wide, but I could have drawn 8 or 9, but I drew 7.
Yeah.
So anyway, I spat on the Friday. I think it was a Friday, Cranbourne, and I decided I'm not going. So I just rang up and said, no, float breakdown, I'm not going to go. And then I had about 15 phone calls from people. Oh, we'll come pick your horses up. We'll come pick your horses. We'll get them, you know.
Yeah.
And they were trying to get, because I scratched, so we'll get the last 2 there. And I thought, that's really good, you know. All these people are trying to get me there to go.
Yeah. You're angry because of the barriers, whereas they're saying, well, what can we do to help this poor bloke out?
So just add a little bit more to that. We went to Yarra Valley, and we were coming out of Yarra Valley up through Diamond Creek, and I burnt the clutch out in the car. So I did have no car. It would have struggled to get there. So that's why.
But the 3 sevens didn't help either.
Then the 7s didn't help, and I just thought that's it. But then I had all these people wanting to help me get there.
That's changed. Did it change the way you looked at harness
racing? It
racing?
made me feel like I wasn't on my own.
Whereas when you're drawing 7 all the time, you're thinking, "What? This is all against me to not survive."
Then I was trying to race at Moonee Valley, and I had horses that good little horses from Adelaide. They just weren't good enough for Melbourne.
Yeah.
Like my favourite fella.
Yep.
Good horse over a short trip. And I'd be putting them on the pegs, and if I kept up to the field, it would be like high-fiving everybody when I come in. It'd be like, we kept up tonight.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the good horses.
Yeah. So you realised you had to change the stock you had.
Yeah. So I then started changing. I started through a friend of mine in New Zealand, Donnie McRae. I used to go spend a bit of time. I used to go to New Zealand 4 times a year and spend a week with him and look around and try and find something. And I found Sokiola.
He was in a paddock, you said? Like, did you not drive Sokiola, you just found him?
No, I drove him. He raced the day before I was there. He'd raced at Southland at Invercargill at Ascot Park. And he actually won while I was actually I was there, and he won. And he won the race. But he didn't beat a great deal. It was a standing start. And the next day I was at Donny's, and we'd looked at horses early, and we'd gone back to his place for breakfast, and I was going through the paper, and the bloke said, this win was no fluke. I wouldn't take less than $50,000 for him. And, and I thought, I didn't mind that horse. I just liked him. And I said, Don, can we go look at this horse? And he goes, I can't take you there. He said, because the bloke, I don't get on with the bloke. Because Donny used to be a straight shooter, and if he didn't get on with you, he didn't get on with you. He said, the bloke's an idiot.
Yep.
And the bloke wasn't an idiot. It's just that Don would.
They clashed. Yep.
So I rang up. I said to Don, well, you've got to know someone. He goes, I'll get Curly Thomas from over the back. Well, Curly Thomas, he come over, and we went down, and Don went with us, but he didn't say nothing.
Yeah.
And Curly rang the bloke, and he's a master of wordsmith. He could talk to the bloke around. The bloke said, Lance wants to come and drive your horse. And he said, okay. So I said, 2 conditions. We have a cup of tea after, and there's chocolate biscuits. That's it. So I went there, and I jumped on old Soki, and I went out on the track.
How old was he at the time?
He was 3.
Yep.
And I drove him down the track, and I thought, he was so narrow in front, and he had no knee boots on. And I sort of just hunted him up, and I thought, if he brushes that knee, he's going to blow a knee up. And I thought, he raced with no knee boots yesterday, or a couple of days ago. So I went 100 yards, turned around, come back, and I just had that feel. And I come back, I'll never forget the chap that was from the neighbours that all come in to watch me work this horse.
Yep.
And I've only gone like 100 yards down the track, back and come back, and they're all walking along behind, and the fellow that used to either own young Quinn or trained young Quinn was walking along behind me, and he said, you don't like him, son? And I said, no, it's all right. And I didn't want to go turn him off then. So we go back inside, and we're sitting inside, everybody come inside. And
must have been daunting trying to buy a horse.
It was, because they used to do it all the time. Apparently, even down south, no one used to come to Invercargill to buy horses, apparently.
Yep.
It wasn't like Christchurch or Auckland. And when someone did come down, it was like, I remember, if I was there, you could get 20 horses to a track for you to drive.
Serious?
At the end of the day, it feel like you're driving track work because you're driving all their horses, but, But I'm sitting there having the cup of tea. We don't have a sip of cup of tea, and I really wanted that horse. I just wanted that horse. I just knew I wanted him, and I said to the bloke, "All right, well, I'll get someone to buy him. We'll get him better." And I was just being as casual as I could be without seeming too excited. Anyway, cut a long story short, I had to chase up. I rang Colin Croft, and he said, nah, bit of money. He said 50,000. No, maybe not straight away. I don't think I'll take him. So I rang Hawkey up, John Hawke, and John Hawke said, give me 2 weeks. And then I rang up Brian Nicholson in Sydney. He said, give me 7 days. And I thought, I'm not going to give you 7 days. I thought, I'm not leaving the country till I pay for this horse.
Yep.
So I thought, I could buy half myself. I was travelling with him up to put 25 up. So then I rang up a couple of mates to see if they wanted to buy the other half, and then I was getting like, is he that good, And anyway, I was sort of just, I told Diane I wasn't coming home until I paid for him. It didn't matter how, if I stay another week, I want this horse, I wanted to see, make sure he's vetted, passed, everything. And anyway, then Colin rang me back and said, yeah, I thought about it, buy him. So I just said to the bloke, he sold, got the money transferred.
And you didn't keep half?
No, I didn't keep half. But because I did keep half, sort of, because then I said to Colin, I'll train him on half stakes, half share. So it was a good horse to take half share on.
Bloody oath. Did he exceed your, like, you go out there and drive him, like, obviously he must have gave you something, and you probably can't really put a handle on exactly what it is, just that, the feel, but, did you think that he would get to where he got to?
Yes, I did. Because I wasn't leaving New Zealand until I paid for him, I put my flight back a week. I said, I'm staying here for a week.
Wow.
So
down south?
Yeah, down south.
Great, it's a great place,
yeah,
but yeah.
Yeah, love to swear, love to drink,
Yep.
love to just watch footy, everything. Anyway, because I did that, then what I did, because this is the first horse I bought from New Zealand that was, I
Good.
paid a bit of money for, it was good. Everybody else thought I was a tyre kicker, because I'd go in and drive their horse, and like a lot of them are bad horses down there, and I used to say, oh, he's not worth much, and I never bought one, and I got a bit of a reputation. They'd say, I remember Murray Brown saying, oh, you know, like, you don't buy them. Well, I don't buy them unless I like them. I don't just buy them for the sake of buying them.
Yep.
So when I bought that horse, everybody on the island down south, ears prick, just bought a horse, 50 grand. 50 grand for that horse. I remember Kenny Barron saying to me, I think you paid too much for him. That's okay. I went around and I drove 5 horses that were for sale for 100,000, and not one of them was as good as him.
What are we talking, what year?
98, 97, 96.
So you went back,
you're somewhere around there.
you went back to being a tyre kicker.
No, I wasn't a tyre.
No, well, I'm saying when they're advertising for 100 grand, you're walking away like.
No, no. But what I did that for is because I figured that everybody knows a good horse. You know a good horse.
Yep.
So if someone goes, if you see a horse in the workouts or trials that's gone really exceptionally well, and he's got 100 grand on 150, you know he's a really good horse.
Yep.
It's easy. Anybody can go and drive a horses that are really high priced, because if everybody likes them, then obviously got the weight of the public opinion on them. If you go to a horse like Sokiola, he had no weight of public opinion on him. No one thought he was any good at all.
Yep.
They just thought he was just. They thought Mervyn Todd, hell of a nice bloke, backyard trainer, no idea. That's what they all thought, that sort of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And the horse is just going to win 1 or 2 races. Boom, boom, 50 grand. Bloke's robbed them. He's robbed the Aussies.
Yeah.
That's what they thought.
What do you end up with?
2 million, 1.9 something.
Yeah.
And I remember. It even got to the stage where I remember Mervyn's actually saying to me a few years later.
You kept in touch with him?
Oh, Mervyn, Todd, we're close friends. I mean, all our Snazola, Sassiola, Jackiola, the mother, Sokiola's sister, he sent it over to me to give it a try. It wasn't up to standard, so we ended up breeding from it.
And that's where the others come from?
And that's all the whole family's come from, all those horses, Smokinola, Spunkiola.
Yeah.
So that's gone on, and we've left Mervyn and his wife down as the breeders, so they get the breeders' bonuses come back to them all the time, and it's been a
great friendship.
You know. It's just
like we could go on about how good a horse he is. People know how good a horse he was, and different. We know it like that way, but it's actually the friendship, if you like, that's possibly the best part. That horse is probably, you know,
like I said, Mervyn. We had a conversation one day. He said to me, "Why didn't you try and barter me down on that horse?" And I said to him, because Mervyn, I thought it was worth a lot more than what you wanted it for. You put in the paper you wanted 50,000. I said, and even when I was driving the horse, I didn't feel like you really wanted to sell it. And I know you didn't want to sell it. And I know you didn't. It was the pressure that he put in the paper that it was for sale for 50,000. If he knocked that back, then all his peers would have said, you're an idiot. Yeah. That horse is not worth 50,000. So I had that weight of confidence to buy the horse, and he sort of backed himself into a corner where he probably had to sell it because he would have thought, you know.
Yeah. It's interesting you say, well, you didn't try and barter him down. I was going to say, because way to the neighbours, all the neighbours sitting around the coffee table with you as well, that mightn't have helped either.
Well, they were pretty influential people. I mean, they trained great horses.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I did buy another. I offered to buy another horse off. He had Soki's brother. I can't think of his name, but he won a race at Blenheim, and I rang up and he wanted 30 or 40, and I actually was going to pay the 30 or 40 for the horse because I thought, well, this one's been winning so much.
Yeah.
And, you know,
even if he's not worth it, swings and roundabouts.
I drove him, I thought he was worth about 10 or 15. I was going to pay 30 for him.
Yep.
Or so, double what he wanted for it, whatever I thought it was worth. But something that happened and he changed his mind, didn't want to sell it, or something happened, so I didn't end up with the horse. But It didn't matter.
What's race record aside? What sort of horse was he, Sokiola? Like, I mean, obviously he was a horse you needed at the time, so I'd imagine he's got a special place for you in that sense. But like, what strong, fast around the stables? Like, what sort of horse was he?
He was a bit of a. He was just a lovely horse all round, but he was super quick out the gate.
Yeah,
as you know, the
posied up always. Yeah,
first Miracle Mile from Barrier 5. He led a mob of superstars on the inside that just didn't believe he was going to come out the gates quick.
Yep.
And he was tough. He could tough it out. His last Mildura Cup win, I think he sat 3 wide nearly the majority of the journey, and still too good for a really good classy field.
Yeah. Did he teach you stuff like I say about Whirly Dreams? Did he?
He taught me that he had this. Him and Smoking Up both had this really natural ability. When you took them onto the track in the warm up, they wouldn't let a horse go past them. So, and I played on that with him. I don't think I ever sat back in the field with them too much, either of them, because they like to be up in the lead, and they would be happy outside the leader or in front.
Yeah.
And I remember Sokiola plenty of times. I would drive him, and you'd come off the back straight, and you'd just ask him to go, and he had this habit of swishing his tail.
Yeah.
And all the opposition, like the bloke outside,
he's gone.
I've got him covered. And they think they've got you covered, so they wouldn't pressure you for the next 50 yards, thinking, well, I've got him anytime I want him. And then you go for home, then you lift the reins, and the Soki just dig in and pull a 3 or 4 metre gap on him.
Yeah.
And then they'd have trouble getting him back. You know, tons of times you would do that.
Most satisfying win with him?
Most satisfying win with Sokiola, well, I would say it would be probably the American Mile. It was the proudest I've felt of a horse.
The day you drove him?
I drove him, yeah. Well, satisfying winning with Jody on him, of course.
Yeah, no.
And
I'm
I
asking.
think he made Jody too. He set Jody up.
Yeah.
Because what people don't realise is that it could have been easily Gavin Lang on that horse.
Well, there was chatter about that, wasn't there?
There was huge chatter, and I copped a lot of flack, and I actually pressured. I spoke to Colin, and I said, this is who I want to drive it, and I put the case up, and then Colin agreed, and we agreed, but we got a lot of flack from a lot of the press guys at the time that said, you know, like, you should be going for a Group 1 driver, but, you know...
Well, you did. You're just ahead of the curve.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I've been ahead of the curve a lot of times in picking drivers too, don't worry.
Yeah.
I think I have.
Yeah.
I mean, I picked Kima Fleming as a good driver, up and comer.
Yeah.
And I used to put her on before David Aiken. I used to put her on horses, and then she was a star there for a while until she retired.
Yeah.
And even to a degree, Diane and I with Jackie Barker. I think Jackie's an enormously good driver.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that. People don't understand that when you drive against people, you know who can drive and who can't drive. And
even if they're not winning, you can actually see parts of them that you can, yeah.
And you know what else? And this is getting off the story a bit, but I think that I used to say to people, they'd say, oh, when are you going to give me a drive? When I was flying, I'd say, you're on the list. Because if you're on my list, you're going to get a drive. If you're not on my list,
you're never going to steer. You're never going to go.
I'd rather be on the list than not on. And there's lots of great drivers that I've never put on that I would have put on in a heartbeat if I had to.
Yeah.
So, you know, like...
So back to that Miracle Mile, why was that just the build up and everything?
The build up, you know, I got there. The hardest thing about the Miracle Mile is getting into the race.
Yeah, especially back then.
I was winning everything. He was winning everything, that horse.
Yeah.
But he couldn't get into the Miracle Mile because, you know, like he was the last horse that was put into the race. I get nearly... It wasn't the extreme. I'd driven the race once before Whirly Dream, but I had 6 with Whirly Dream. I had the extreme draw, and it was impossible to beat. Like a horse like Village Kid draws 1. How do you beat? Yeah. You know, like, and he still went really good Whirly Dream, and that was my first taste of it. My next taste was Sokiola. I was completely different with Sokiola. I was a lot more relaxed because I worked out with Whirly Dream. Just lining up the race in that race, you get a check. You get a check. Oh. You get 14,000 for going around. So at the time, I thought, yeah, I'm here. I'm in the Miracle Mile. This is the biggest race in Australia. I'm here again. I'm so lucky. I got nothing. I'm a winner already. Yeah. This horse picks up $14,000. We get $7,000. Colin gets $7,000. We're winners. Yep. And that's how I took that attitude into it. And I didn't want to say all the pre-race hype. I remember the they drag me down to get on the camera and they're going, oh, what are you going to do from the start? And I'm there, it's barrier 5, it's a hard barrier, there's superstars, I've got double identity drawn inside of me, I can't remember guys, but all these fast horses inside. I said, they're all noted leaders. I said, I'm out in barrier 5. I said, I'm just going to have to drive for luck. I didn't want to lie to them, but I didn't want to go, I didn't want to go tell them that I was going to
burn the gate,
eyeball the gate.
Yeah.
But anybody watching the warm-up would have understood I was going to eyeball it because I turned him into the front straight and let him loose for a bit. And then I worked out, because I hadn't driven on that track, and Soki had a really bad habit of getting to the turn and then laying left on top of him. And I thought, I can't knock him over in a Miracle Mile. So they had a Qantas sign on the fence. And I worked out if I steered him between the A and the S on the sign, that would be 2 3/4 carts off the inside. That means I've only got to get over 2, and I'll just give myself a guideline.
Yep.
Because it was a strange track to me. I hadn't driven on Harold Park that much. And, everybody kept saying, that turn, the first turn, they'll lay in there. And I thought, they'll lay in there, he'll lay in worse. So, and I don't want to be the first driver to clean up the front row in the Miracle Mile.
Double identity. And Harry, he used to do the same sort of thing too, didn't he? And he was underneath us, so yeah.
So I give him that extra bit of space, aim for the Qantas, end of the Qantas sign, the last bit of the word, and didn't have to carry it out because I got past him before that, and then I could drop him straight across. And then going down the back straight the last time, the favourite was the Falcon Strike was outside of me, and I'll never forget, he was gone. He was gone. I was coming off the back straight, and he was starting to ask it, and I'm thinking, there ain't no more there, buddy.
Yep.
So I nearly took off. I nearly went. I nearly set for home, coming off the back straight. And then I thought, nah. I remember my old grandfather used to say to me, when you're about to go and you're in front, take a breath, and count to 3 and have a look around. So I took a breath, counted to 3, and then I sent him.
Yeah.
And I won. And I think if I had sent him for home then, I would have got beat. Because I only won by 1.5 meters.
Yeah.
So.
You remember it like yesterday too, don't you?
Oh, yeah. It's as clear as.
Can you just, was that at the time the most satisfying win you've ever had?
Well, it was, because normally when I used to go back to scales, you would just turn around and go back to scales. Well, I actually sat up in the cart like, just won a Miracle Mile. I won a Miracle Mile.
You pinch yourself, I could talk about him all day. Not long after that, Smoking Up comes along. Can you, to get 2 horses, or 3 horses, because I think, Whirly's, a lot of people
had a lot of good horses in between those two.
I know, but
Diamond Blue Chip, Mike's Choice,
did Mike's Choice win in the Italian Cup?
Not Moonee Valley, in Adelaide he did, but he didn't. He only raced once or twice at Moonee Valley.
Yeah,
but he raced when he was broken down. He was towards the end of his career. He had really bad feet.
Yeah,
but he won 16 in a row in Adelaide, and he was pretty strong. And he used to race against Tip Top Prince. He always Tip Top Prince and him were the 2 horses that whichever one got the best trip would
win.
Yeah,
and you just had some big battles. That was back when the stables had moved. You weren't side by side at that stage. I remember that.
I know that, and the thing with it is that it was almost like, I don't know, people really understood how bad it was. I mean, Tip Top Prince, he'd win 3 in a row, then Mike's Choice would come back in and knock him off and win 3 in a row, then Tip Top would win 3 in a row. And it was like, but we didn't used to clash all the time. It was only like Tip Top would win against the others, and then Mike come and beat him, and then Tip Top wouldn't race for a couple of weeks, and then Mike would win, and then Tip Top would beat him. And so it was like 2 really good horses, and Tip Top Prince, as everybody knew, he come across and won the Italian Cup and smashed them that night at Moonee Valley. Smashed a huge field.
Yeah, great horse.
I mean, we had good horses. I mean, our horses were as good as anywhere in the land.
I've got another podcast coming out. I'm going to sit here and do just you and John, and I don't think I'll have to say too much. So let's go back to Smoking Up, because I think these horses are horses that a lot of the generation now, especially Smoking Up. Luke Humphries loved him, idolised the horse. He was a unique horse. He was spreaders, had a high head check, tough, adaptable.
He didn't wear spreaders in the end. He wore spreaders for a little while.
Yeah.
Sakiola wore spreaders for a little while. And I put him on him because the very reason that when I got him in New Zealand, he was so narrow and immature as a 3-year-old. I took him back to Adelaide, Soki, and I gave him his first 4 starts. His first 5 starts were all in restricted class racing, because I'd already had a plan to come to Melbourne.
Yep.
Like I was, doing the weighing up, and I had to sell the farm over there. And what do I do? Do I change my whole lifestyle? Do I stay here and keep being the big fish in the little pond, or do I try and stretch my wings and try and take on the boys in Melbourne, which John had already showed me it wasn't impossible. It was hard, but it wasn't impossible because they're all great trainers. In Victoria, there's some great trainers over here, and great trainers everywhere. But Victoria seems to be the cluster of the best, the best of the best. And it's big at pool, and you meet more people. So I raced Soki in his first 5 starts. He won his first 4, I think, like 20, 30, 40 metres, something like that, in restricted company. And then I got beat with him one night. Jeff Webster was in front, and he ran up the track and locked wheels, and we bumped, and I got off, and I thought I was still going to win, and I didn't win. And I don't protest very often in my life, but I protested that night, and I didn't get it. So I cracked it and turned him out on spell, and thought, no, I'm going to go Northern. That's it, we'll go.
And he was on a good mark.
And he was come over here as a CO 4-year-old.
Wow.
And the first race I took him to was at Warragul, and I won. And I remember Bill Hutchison saying to me, or he said to, when he was doing a summary of the racing, he said, I think Soki had his birthday today, because he only won by a head.
Was that Red Rag to a Bull, was it?
No, not really. But that's what Soki was like. Soki would never win by a big margin. And same with Smoking Up.
Yeah.
Soki won by a big margin his first 4 starts because he was racing really bad horses.
Yep.
But he didn't ever, after that, he used to wait for everybody. Like, they used to only race their opposition. And the next start, I took him to Cranbourne, and I led, and Chris Alford whizzed up outside me on Tromos, and he said, this horse is better than the horse you won the
Golden Rain?
Golden Rain. This is better than Golden Rain. And I said, this one's better than Whirly Dream. That's what I said to him. I just kept it, and I won the race easily, and he ran second or third. But that sort of thing, that sort of rivalry with it. But then Soki just got better and better and sharper and sharper.
But Smoking Up almost followed that same sort of trajectory, although probably had a bigger rap on him. It's a bit hard on Soki in a way, but there was probably more fanfare, if you like, around Smoking Up, which could have been off the back of Sokiola and where you were, that you've got this other good horse.
I think it was. Sokiola actually retired when his last race started at Moonee Valley, going 156, and went really strong and won comfortably. But he wasn't as good as he was earlier.
Yep.
He was 10, he was starting to slow down a bit. And when Smoking Up come, I think we hobbled me together one day on the track, and Smoking Up was just strong, young, dumb.
Yeah.
And Soki was old, smart, and worn out, sort of like. He had quite a few starts, won a lot of money. And
did you pinch yourself though?
I did. I did. The peer pressure to retire him was like, I just wish we'd had more country free-for-alls, because he could have gone around another season or two out in the country and still would have won every second or third start.
Yeah. And
would have been able to keep going. But I didn't want to go send him to another state because he'd been so good.
He'd been good to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to get that horse Smoking Up was like, I never forget, the chaps that bought Smoking Up had Smooth Cruiser with me. We just won the Terrain Cup. And he was sort of like that crew, Lorado, Smooth Cruiser, they were coming up, and they were nice horses, and they could win cups. We won the Casey Classic with Smooth Cruiser, and I'll never forget, Alex rang me up and he said, hey Lance, he goes, how's Smooth Cruiser going? And I said, Alex, next week it'll be How's Smoking Up. You won't even remember that other horse. And he goes, you've never raced him, you're saying that. And I said, I'm just telling you, he's good.
Yeah.
He was better than them. And his first couple of starts, he never won by big margins, but he just kept, when he won the first 12, I think, for me.
But they're so similar in so many ways as well. So great gate speed,
tough,
strength.
And yet, like Smoking Up, when I got him, he wasn't that fast out the gate early. He ended up it. Yeah, I know, but it took a lot. He was a very unbalanced horse. That's why I think they sold him, because they just didn't think he would ever get to be a high-speed horse, because he was a bit like a bucket of bolts. He wouldn't go around the corners that good. And I think he looked at his first couple of wins with me. I had trouble getting him around the corner at Cranbourne, but he was just too good for him. He looked like he was going to get beat, and he was just too good.
What was his best win?
I really reckon his best win was probably the 148.5, But I would say the one I got the most...
Because that was an Australian record
That was the first horse to break 150.
Yeah.
And that was huge. But my biggest thrill was the night that he beat Caribbean Blaster at Globe Derby in his fourth Cup win, where Caribbean Blaster...
He had the fanfare.
Well, he had me beat. I come off the back straight, he got 1 metre on me, then he got 2 metres, and he had his wheel outside my legs, and he was laying it a bit on top, and he had me over the pegs, and I'm sort of trying to get around the corner, and he's got me beaten, and I sort of half nearly give up myself. I thought, I'm going to...
He never did though, did he?
And next minute I got him to straight, and I've straightened him up, give him a touch with a whip, and and I didn't have to hardly touch him, he's gone back 1 by 2 metres. And it was like, how good was this horse? How good was he just to know that...
Was that his greatest attribute?
Well, he just knew he had to get round the corner. He knew that he was getting it was a little bit tight, and he knew that he was getting, he was sort of getting a bit crowded, and because, the good horses, when they're going really fast on Globe Derby, tend to lay in a bit. Yeah. And he just figured that once it's almost like he knew, once I get round the turn and get in the straight, I'll be right, I'll get going. Yeah. And he did. And to make that 2 metres up, he made it up in 5 strides.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you pinch yourself? You say there before, you started rattling off a couple other horses. But I mean, in anyone's training repertoire, and I haven't mentioned trotters, haven't gone anywhere, but you mentioned those 3 horses, Whirly Dream, Soakiola, Smoking Up. They're horses, the history of harness racing, people are going to be talking about them, long after you and I are gone.
Well, that's what made me sit up after I won that first American Mile with Soakiola, because what it was, I actually thought, you finally made it, you become immortal.
Yeah.
You and this horse will go down in history. I can remember the Tasmanian in Dominion sitting at my place watching those great horses go around and thinking to myself,
you want to be a part of it?
I would love to be a part of that.
Yeah.
But that was my dream, but realistically I couldn't win a race at Cadena.
Yep.
I couldn't win a race at Cadena, and yet I was dreaming about competing against...
You're clerk of the coursing and you're putting thoroughbreds into barriers, and
I was doing everything I could. I even auditioned for an extra in The Light Horseman.
and missed out.
Well,
by the sounds.
No, I almost got called. I got called back, but I had my first Saturday night horse was in the following Saturday. And I thought, do I want to go to the Light Horseman as an extra galloping across in the movie, or do I want to go to the trots?
What sort of horse, rider? What sort of rider in that were you, or are you?
I was. I won the 1973 Yunta Cup as a jockey. I won the O'Leary Cup.
Yep.
I got beaten in the Manor Hill Cup. There's 3 cups there.
What are they, like bush races?
Picnic race bush cups.
Wow.
On the road to Broken Hill from Adelaide. I won the Kaipo Cup. I ran second in the Cadena Cup. As a teenager, I always wanted to be a jockey.
Yeah.
But I just got too tall.
Yeah.
And I worked out when I was 15, I didn't have a licence, but I was still going to these places. I could ride at 59 with a saddle, 58 to 59 kilos. Yeah. And that was always the top weight at the country cups. They were always 59, 60.
Do you think that's stood you in good stead? Because Whirly Dream, I can't remember. He was, I was in the game, but probably too young. And in South Australia, we didn't have Sky Channel like we do now. Soakiola, Smoking Up, and so many other of your good horses drive on a nice rein, deliver when you ask, if you like you'll lift the reins and they'll give. They know where the line is. There are no fuss horses around the place. They'll let airs and graces. Do you think that comes from the start of this interview where you were saying where you had to learn with Dick, with all these horses, drive? I can't remember the guy who had the gear tied together with wire, Jack. But do you think that's what stood you instead to now?
I think that was a big part of my learning, as into when you're on bad horses, bury them on the fence and try and follow the rails and get through. Because if you put them out in the open, they only make you look bad. Yeah. And Gavin was a great one for this. If the horse he was driving wasn't much good, he'd sneak it up on the pegs. And people don't remember you. They remember you if you whiz around and try and take the lead on and you fail. They don't remember if you bury up on the pegs and you run a nice 5th or 6th or 7th. You don't stand out. But when you start hanging yourself out to dry and start really competing, you got to have the greatest confidence in your horse. Because if you haven't got the confidence in the horse and he doesn't do it, then you're in big trouble. So that's I think that taught me to be. Because I remember my second and third win were on the same day at Whyalla, and I remember the chap that my first bloke I ever worked for when I left school, give me a part-time job, was Jim Spears. He was the one that built the Hall of Fame out at Globe Derby, and he had Minor Derby's heart and all that sort of stuff there. He gave me my first job, and I remember he must have backed the first two because he was at Whyalla. Whyala's about 4 hours from Adelaide, and he was pretty happy. I got beat on the Monday on both those horses. They both got rolled, but they'd all raced on the Friday night, then gone to Whyalla on the Saturday and raced, and then had Sunday off and then raced on the Monday. So Monday they were a bit tight.
Yeah.
But it was like a carnival thing. It was really good. But I remember him saying to me, I went to the pegs on the last day, and he goes, when you start going to the pegs, it means you're not trying, you're not good enough. But yeah.
It wasn't that. It was actually you knew what you were driving.
I knew I was driving. I knew the horse was a bit tired. And, yeah.
And that stands you in good stead to today.
I think so, yeah. But I mean, like, you talk about horses. We were brought up as kids. We always had a horse.
Yeah.
We always had a horse. It didn't matter, like, from John and I being 2 and 3 years old, or probably before
John having a lead rope and didn't realise what.
And then Joanne come along.
Yeah.
And then she was a baby on the bassinet and on the floor of the jog cart.
Yeah.
And so we'd always been behind the horse. It's like a drug. You smell the sweat of a horse, and it's like addictive.
Yeah.
You always want to be around them. And then we had ponies, and for a long time we survived as mum and dad survived as, like, they'd be going to the Gawler sales, and they'd buy ponies. Mad horses come through. They'd buy them. As kids, we'd ride them, break them and ride them, and then they'd sell them as ponies. And we did pony rides and stuff like that at the Christmas times at all the shopping centres and stuff like that.
To make a bit of coin.
That's how we survived as growing up. We didn't, like, I even jumped onto a page the other day, an old school page that started up down, because we went to school next to Days Road Trotting Track, which is Angle Park Dogs now, in that high school. I think John and I spent most of our time watching to see who was working their horses at the track. We get recess, we'd go jump through the whole fence and go and talk to the trainers. Or even John used to weigh school, he'd go to Freddie Fulgray's blacksmith shop and sit there most of the day, and then
learn to shoot, or
learn to shoot, pretend he was at school,
yeah.
Go home and say I had a hard day at school, but he'd been in the blacksmith shop all day.
Yeah,
that sort of stuff
stands you in good stead.
I mean, the blacksmith used to encourage us too. Like, he used to give us.
I bet he would.
Yeah, we'd be the old fire, stoking a fire for him and stuff. Like,
you're doing less work, and you guys were doing.
But I mean, getting to say that, like, horses are always part of our life. We get them going, and just ponies and.
Yeah, mate, I've loved this trotters. Before, actually, I can't finish just yet because all paces, but your hand in trotters as well. Like, you love them. They've been part of you as well.
They have. Trotters have been. I always preferred trotters over paces when I first started.
Is that because of Dick, or is it just?
Well, yeah. I mean, Glennie Capers was Dick's Janet White's horse.
Yeah.
And she loved that horse, and I won all the races on it. I think Dick won once on it.
Yep.
I won the other 19 on it, or it was.
Yeah.
And most times, they didn't expect it to win.
Yeah.
They never expected to win, because that was Dick's horse. They owned it, and I used to just speed them on whatever they thought would.
Yep.
So that was my start off. I used to drive for Freddie Melville, Bayside Brigade, as a trotter. These are, all really old rough trotters. John had Gathered Wealth. I've had great trotters over the years. I had Angry Eyes, French Wine, Rebel Shot. Just trotters that just turned out really good trotters. Yeah. Earl of Mott, Moto Young Jacob was a Monty trotter, won Monty of the Year.
Yep.
Uncle Patrika.
Yeah.
Earl of Mott won the Breeders' Crown. There's just great trotters over the years.
Yeah.
Kanuka Jive. They've all been good.
Yeah.
I had lots and lots of trotters. I think of them I do love the trotter, yeah.
Well, you got a great story to tell. I think you're well and truly worthy recipient of the Gordon Rothacker, and I think it was great insight at the start of that. I could talk to you probably for another half hour to an hour.
Mate, there's stories I could tell you that you wouldn't believe that could go, like, with how some of these horses come across and how I got them, and every horse has got a story.
Yeah.
I mean, as people,
one thing I love, your memory. I mean, I scratch sometimes trying to remember and listening to people's names. Peter Gorst was a name that I was talking to someone else just recently about, and he was a guy that I met at Merv Dillon's. I mean, but your memory for these guys, and obviously you hold in your heart a lot of the people that helped you, I suppose. Would that be fair?
I've been associated with people that my whole life. I mean, the guys like Alan Turner and Colin Croft and John Hawke and Ted Marantelli, all those people, they weren't with me for 1 year, 2 years,
No.
5 years. They've been with me for 40 years. From when I started, they've been with me. They've always been with me. Bob Willis, another name. Guys that just, I must have done something right to have these people still around me.
And then you also your horses. Whirly Dream, 10-year-old. Sokiola, 10-year-old. Smoking Up, he was 9, I think. Or was he?
He retired when he was 12.
12,
13.
sorry, other way around. So you've got these horses that have all raced
All
well.
their whole lives, right through, yeah.
Right through. So you've had a hell of a journey when you think about
And,
it.
you know, there's a lot of good horses that I've sold to America too that have gone on and won over there that I wish that I'd kept. But at the time, sometimes you got to, our system of handicapping wasn't perfect for them here. So
Yeah.
you've got to move them on if you can. I mean, Diane had Bad Boy Brad, was a great little horse for her. He went on one a heap in America, but yeah. And then I've still got Old Love and a Chevy. All girls.
And what a story!
Chevy.
Yeah, well, that's exactly
No,
right. The horse with the snake bite. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and
he.
you could have quite easily walked away from him, and no one would have thought anything less.
I remember when I walked into the yard the morning after we found him, and they all come out crying. They said, we've got to put him down. And I just said, I picked his head up off the ground, and I looked at him, and I looked him in the eye, and he looked at me, and I could tell that he wanted to live. So I said, no, get
Keep
the vet
going.
here, get the vet. We're going to try something with this horse.
Yeah.
I said, you can tell when an animal gives up, and he hadn't given up.
You've changed jobs now. It's remiss of us not to mention Diane and Leilani and the job. She does an amazing job. I want to do a story with her riding as well because of the cross. Are you proud of them?
I'm proud of them both. They both do a great job, and I'm proud of my whole family. As a matter of fact, they've all done a great job. Eva's doing an exceptionally good job.
It's quite interesting, you and John's path, isn't it? You're so similar. Like your daughters are both now driving. Like it's quite similar the direction you guys have had.
We've always been very close, but very, very distant. If you know, it's a funny thing because I mean, I love John to death, but the thing is, sometimes he doesn't. I feel sometimes that we were very distant. We don't socialise a great deal, but we're always there. So
it's the way you are. You probably, if you need one or another, you just pick the phone up.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been. If I couldn't win a race and he was racing, I would be happy for him to win, and that sort of thing. But I'm always happy for Eva to be successful.
Yep.
I would like Lani to get a little bit more nastiness, grit,
a bit more shit.
A bit more of the my attitude when I used to race. I mean, no one would dare come and try and take the lead off me unless they were crazy, or the breeze if I wanted it.
Yeah. But see, I've seen different side to her. I was at Werribee one day, and she had a horse, and it couldn't get over the jump, and it was tired. And Lance put her over the jump because she needed the horse to get over the jump to win it. But then she puts her hand in the air and she said, "That's it, I'm done." Yeah. She is a very, very accomplished horse person. There's so many different sides to her.
Yeah.
And that's one part about it.
It's knowing your limitations too, I suppose. So
exactly. Yeah. But it also comes back to being a horse person. She didn't care about winning on that day, and anything at Werribee is prestigious. I don't even know what the day was, but I mean, to put your hand in the air.
It also reminds me of the time when I had a horse in the Great Western Steeplechase at Victoria.
Did you ride it?
No, I wasn't riding it, but I had a jockey on it, which I brought over from Victoria, and most of the field had fallen over and fallen off, and it was running fourth, and it was about a $22,000 check to run fourth, and my jockey swung around the outside of the jump and then didn't go back and jump it to run fourth, pulled up, and cost...
Last jump?
Second last jump. That was the most frustrating thing I think, because that horse, his name was Mr. Millionaire, was never going to win anything, but that would have been his claim to fame, running in fourth in the Great Western Steeple.
And you would have had that. So was that how many thoroughbreds you trained?
I trained a couple, 3 or 4 years, a couple of them. Nova Brigade in South Australia was one. The first 2 gallopers I took to the races, I took them to Narracourt, and the lad that used to help me, Michael Pearson, because we always grew up around the Gallopers. I remember going to I said, find a race for us that we can go where we can win. So we put these two horses in at Narracourt, and we're driving to Narracourt, and Ron Paps gets on the radio. This was the strongest Narracourt meeting I've seen in 20 years. And I looked at Michael and I said, I wanted the weakest meeting, not the strongest. And they both started favourite and they both run fourth. But we had a little bit of success, but we didn't have the horses.
Nah.
It's all about the horsepower with them, with the thoroughbreds. There's only a half length between the bad one and the good one.
Just quickly, do you miss South Australia?
I miss the lifestyle, the family and kids that are left over there still.
Yep.
But
Victoria's home.
Victoria.
Well, you're actually a Victorian. I didn't realise that. One thing I did realise, you moved
born
there.
in Victoria, and we started off out at Deer Park, and and Mum come up across Tassie and used to work for Pearl Kelly, and it's great. We've been associated with a lot of really good people over the years.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't always been on top, and
the one thing people say to me, most people say to me when I do one of these, I'm surprised actually that camera doesn't have a lot of battery on it, but it is actually still going. It's when people remember names. I can guarantee you, most people, the comments I'm going to get from this are some of the names that you've been able to rattle off, and that's why I think I've loved this. I wasn't sure how this interview was going to go.
Well, Ginger Gleeson, when he was 13, he's a little bit older than me. When he was a kid, he used to come over to where we stayed at, and I think he moved into the place after we moved back to South Australia as kids.
Where he is now?
No.
Oh, another place, yeah.
Deer Park.
Yeah.
So Ginger and I sort of crossed paths.
Back in the day, early on.
Early, long time ago. And like Ginger and I have always been great friends, so that's another guy that...
Toughest competitor?
God, there's so many tough competitors.
We'll leave John out of it too.
Toughest competitor that I ever raced against. And he always gets this all the time. It's probably Chris Alford. He's such a narc sometimes.
That is probably fair. The one person you've really looked up to in your journey?
I looked up to Bobby Jakes, Keith Bennett, Kevin Brook. I haven't got one person.
No.
I've always had a lot of. I think back when I first started driving, I was so rude to some of those guys. They were legends, but if you didn't drive as hard as them, you got no respect from them. And And just before I stopped driving, I realised when the young lads start pushing you, trying to push you around and stuff like that. And I remember GA one night in a race at Geelong, he come past me, I took the lead off him and at the start, and he wanted to come past. And he come past and give me a haircut going past. And I thought, that's all right. And when we pulled up, I said, you got nothing to prove to me, GA, you're a legend. I just said that. Anyway, he come back to me after and he said something about it. He goes, oh, well, he said, you just got to show him you're still out there. And I understood what he meant. If you're too nice, people forget. And in the end, I got to the stage where I was driving. I wasn't driving very good horses, and I'm going around and I've got kids pushing up and tightening up, and I'm thinking to myself, do I need to be out here copping this? If I had a smoking up or something out here to go back or something good, I probably would have kept driving a bit longer. But yeah.
I remember I had a brand new black sulky and it came back with blue paint on it. The blue paint was yours. I think Hayden Gray tried to move you and it wasn't happening.
Yeah, no. I didn't want to move. They didn't want to move. But in the end, you pick your marks. If you're not, I was also, if someone was driving, I was driving against somebody that showed me respect.
You'd show them.
I'd show them respect. And if I couldn't run in the first 3 or 4, I would give them the space. But if there was someone that was been giving me a hard time or showing me no respect, then they wouldn't move. They wouldn't get out either.
No.
I'd stay there. But I've never been a sore loser or a bad, dirty driver. I've always been fair.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are some drivers out there that I've thought to myself, it is a one-way street sometimes. They all want it their way, and that's it. But you've got to give a little bit of respect to get it.
Absolutely earn it. Well done to yourself. 2023 Gordon Rothacker Medal. Thank you so much for the chat. I think we might have to try and sit down with John and, as I said, I might just put 2 microphones. I don't think I'll have to say too much.
No, but that would be good because John could tell you stories. You'd probably get the other side of the stories.
Yeah.
Like you get my side of it and then his side. It'd always be different. I mean, sometimes when we were racing there, I used to, if I'd see him going to Mildura, then I go, oh, good, he's not going to be there Friday night. That I can.
It was better for you.
Yeah, it's better. No
anxiety.
Yeah. Well, not anxiety, but going to be a little bit easier for me.
Yeah.
He had great horses too, so don't worry about that. He could tell you, he probably equal to my horses.
Thank you very, very much for the chat. I've absolutely loved it. Very worthy recipient. Congratulations on your great career, and it's not over because you are still working for Harness Racing Victoria. You never know what will happen next week or next year and things along those lines. As I said, Diane and Leilani are still well and truly entrenched in the game, so I really appreciate it. But seriously, congratulations. It's a great achievement, and you've proven it by this chat, some of the names you've rattled off, mate, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. And look, I all my life, it's all I've wanted to do is basically help people, and I've always wanted to help people that I thought needed or trying. And you know, the Trainers and Drivers Association, all those years, and before that I was with Botra, and to be able to add and give something back to harness racing is all I've ever wanted to do. And I've always believed what you get out, what you give back helps to what you've got out of it.
Yeah. And
it's been very good to me. It's been a great. I might have seen the best of it, but it's been great to me. But I want to give back. I want to help. If someone needs help, then I'm happy to help back.
No,
so that's what it's been.
Contact him. Thanks very much, mate.